I do not believe that I was created, and I don't believe I was created sick and then commanded to be well. I just choose not to believe it. I don't think it's a plausible proposition. I don't think that it's plausible to say that you hate the sin and love the sinner when you talk like Mr. Donohue does about homosexuals.
Now, why are people dead from sex? Is it because they are practicing natural sex, or are they practicing unnatural, promiscuous sex?
How do you love somebody? You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. Leviticus 18, God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying.
That's what I believe that the scripture says, that homosexuality is a sin.
It's a sin.
You think I'm sinful because I'm married to a man?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes, you're sinning. You are in a sinful relationship.
And I think it's casuistry anyway, because who really goes around saying, I don't like rape, but I love those rapists?
I think we are divided as between those of us who attribute our presence here to the laws of biology and the laws of physics, and those of us who, and we are modest in doing that, I think, we say we submit ourselves to the evidence, and even if it comes up with conclusions that aren't very welcome to us, we will accept them if they're well-founded, and those who are conceited enough, I would say, arrogant enough, in fact, to think that they are here as the consequence of a divine design. There's all the difference in the world between those two worldviews, and the big difference is one of them has evidence for it and the other doesn't. And one of them will say in advance what would refute it. I can tell you, if you ask me, what evidence, if presented, would mean I'd have to change my mind, and the theist will never do that. He will never tell you in advance, show me this and I'll stop believing in it. There's always an infinite replenishment of the infinitely renewable resource of faith going on. In fact, it's the humility of it that makes me laugh at it in a way the most. They say that they're humble, these believers in God. They want to be written up as modest because they think that, of course, that God tells them they're worms, originally sinful, ingrates, incurable, made out of dust in one narrative, out of a clot of blood in the Quranic narrative, bad, off to a pretty shaky start, condemned since an original fall of man. Nonetheless, cheer up. The universe is designed with you in mind. This is a depraved form of sadomasochism, in my view. It's not good for you to go from this terrible abjection and serfdom in the one instance to this belief that you are the center of creation and the object of the cosmos in the other. It's a terrible alternation, a neurotic alternation between being much too servile and much too arrogant.
Teaching of that kind, teaching about abstention, clearly cannot lead to death from sex. But to say that AIDS is death from sex is, I think, to commit an obscenity. I'm sorry to have to say that the brothers and sisters of our society who have succumbed to that appalling disease did not die of sex or of their sexuality. And remember, homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love. They died. That's interesting. I wondered what kind of a growl I might get there. Well, I'll repeat it then. Homosexuals practice not just a form of sex, but a form of love. If you can't live with it, I think you're the poorer. However, what they died of was a filthy virus which can and will be cured. And the clear implication of what Dr. Donohue said was that it was some kind of judgment on their sexual preference. I'm sorry I can't sit here, rather stand here and take that. This is why I don't think secular morality needs to be defended from the barbaric superstitions and guilts and obscene suggestions that are made by the godly, or from the repressions and unguessable motives that lie behind people who talk and think and sound like that. I think the religion gets a free pass in making moral casuistry of this kind. I think it is possible. I may not be the best example of it, and I did flicker a bit with enthusiasm when the alcohol and tobacco lobbies were mentioned a moment ago. If you'd thrown in firearms, you'd have had me altogether. I may not be the best example for it, but it is possible and probably necessary that people lead ethical and moral lives without claiming the solipsism of divine protection. Thank you.
I do insist that this kind of bad behavior is innate in religion, is part of religion itself. It's not an abuse of it or something undertaken in the name of. It's a direct consequence
of the willingness to believe in the supernatural and the willingness to believe in a supernatural dictatorship in particular. And we live on a very small planet in a very minor solar system on the very edge of a gigantic galaxy, where the remainder of the planets, just in our own solar system, are either too fucking hot or too sodding cold to support life of any kind, as is true of very great swathes of our own planet, which is on a climatic knife edge, if we didn't know before, we know now. So to say that this is the center of the universe and the whole objective of the cosmos is to produce this conversation is an extraordinarily self-centered thing to do, it seems to me. And also doesn't, in return for its self-centeredness, which might be excused in the Randian terms, at least let's think we're gods, at least let's believe that we are the most beautifully charismatic sex maniacs who've ever appeared on any planet, doesn't yield any knowledge, doesn't help us in the least to clarify anything. No, I think we would do much better to understand our place in the cosmos. And I think if we did, we'd turn to each other with a little more respect and concern and compassion and understanding. And maybe to the people who we found are spliced into our own DNA as well. Having this wonderful sequencing, having abolished racism and creationism at one stroke, I regard that as a huge step forward, I must say, to understand one's kinship with all other humans, with some other animals, even with vegetables and plants. It doesn't make me feel worse, it makes me feel better. It also makes me feel I know where I am, which the other stuff simply doesn't. So I wouldn't trade that for any of your pseudo-universality, sorry.
I can't believe we're here alone by ourselves with each other 100%. I can't believe that.
Okay.
It is, I mean, it is rather a bleak thought. The problem is that you mustn't catch yourself disbelieving things because you might not want them to be true, or believing things because you might like them to be true. And fear of death. We're the only species that knows it's going to die. Not everyone is completely happy with the idea of checking out and going back to being atoms again. Religion makes the false promise that if you join the right group or make the right prayers or obeisances or propitiations, an exception to this unbreakable rule will be made in your own case. That's obviously nonsense. It's professional lying for profit by priests. But the desire to believe it, the desire to go in for wish thinking, the ability to do that is very great. She wanted to know when I wrote it off. Well, I've already told you. She perhaps wasn't tuned in when we did old Mrs. Watts, Mrs. Jean Watts. But it's more a matter of realizing that I didn't believe it than having believed it and repudiating that. That was, for me, a realization of unbelief rather than a conversion experience. There are, just as we keep on being told, well, but think about how many people are faithful and religious. Well, if that's a point, which I doubt it is, then it must also be a point that there are many, many, many of us who are so constituted that we can't believe this nonsense. It doesn't make any impression on us. It's white noise. It rolls off like water off a duck's back. And we are made in the image of God too, I presume. So he must have wanted there at least to be some people who weren't taken in.
Why do you think then that over 1 billion people on this earth think there's some kind of a higher power?
I don't know that they do, but I think that the reason would be, let's grant that they really do believe this and give them credit for sincerity in the belief. My analysis in my book is this: we are pattern-seeking animals. It's a good thing about us that we look for patterns, we look for recurrences and consistencies and so forth. And it's a weakness as well as a strength, because for example, we prefer a conspiracy theory to no theory at all. But we do look for patterns, and it's quite difficult for us to imagine that we don't know the cause of things, or the first cause. We'd like to think we could find that out. And we also have, it's very easy to persuade us that things are all about us and that we're the object of all this. So if people say, well, look, the stars move in a predictable way, the seasons move in a predictable way, there must be some system here, it must mean something, it must have been started by someone. Now, as you know, all of these are completely unwarrantable assumptions, but they're counterintuitive is the problem with the truth of it. Don't ever think you are the center of the world. Be very careful of assuming that you are the object of a divine design, that there's something special just about being you. That's all you have to prove. That why wouldn't a person such as yourself have God on their side? Why wouldn't it be? Of course God would care who I slept with, what I ate, what holy day I observed. Why would he not? Surely that's why the heavens are arranged in the starry beauty and array that the form they take. And then you read Hamlet's reflections with Yorick at the side of the grave, and you are forced to wonder if maybe, even though it's a less beautiful thought, it could be that the galaxies are not arranged with you in mind. You asked me what I think the source is, and where you almost seem to ask, where does my divine spark come from? Well, sweetie, I don't know, but I don't mind not knowing. I look forward to discovering further frontiers of my ignorance. Socrates was never wiser than when he said the definition of the educator is the one who has some idea of how little he knows. And the more education you get, and the older, I warn you, you get, the more you'll find out that you know more and more about less and less and less, and more things. And it's wonderful. It's a tremendous experiment in learning. So I'm quite happy to say I don't know, but the believer has to say that they do know. They can't hedge this. If it be not true, as St. Paul says, that Christ crucified, rose again, we are the unhappiest people living. That I can take seriously. That I can understand. And I take leave to doubt it. And I don't believe there's any salvation. I don't believe there is any redemption.
If you'd like to support me in creating more of these types of videos, you can do so by donating to the channel through our Patreon page. This will also give you early access to videos and channel updates. You will also get access to our Discord server, where you can participate in discussions and debates with other members of our community. You can check it out by clicking the link in the video description.